Okay, so a lot of my friends are getting into Linux and have asked me some advice and like how to install certain things like OpenVPN. Well, today I'm going to show a video of about 6 tools that I would recommend they start learning how to use. The first one is PuTTY. PuTTY is basically an SSH client. It does other things that you can do for testing like telnet and just sending raw packets. But for the most part, we use telnet SSH to get into our Linux box. And here we have a box titled CentOS, the CentOS 7 box. And you can see I logged in and I can do commands like ls and whatnot. I can change to root and then run some what they call ncurses commands, and one of them is called nm2e. And you can, modify your system and whatnot, and edit and do whatever you need to. This PuTTY and SSH is probably the most common way someone would get into and manage a Linux system. And a lot of systems in the cloud, like on Amazon Web Services, have SSH open, so you can use a PuTTY client and modify your configs in the cloud. Related to PuTTY is number 2, the WinSCP utility, which allows you to transfer files back and forth between your Linux box and your Windows box. In the PuTTY example, I logged in as Larry. In this example, I'm logging in as root, and there's going to be a reason why. I'll show you in a second. Okay. Now, normally, I don't recommend people log in as root, but in this case, it might be handy for whatever you're doing. Like here, if I go into, like say I wanted to modify the etc host directory, I could just look for the host file, right mouse click and hit edit, and then you see it opens up in some sort of text editor. And also from your desktop you can drag and drop whatnot that you have to, and then afterwards you can run a command against it, like here, either open the terminal or run a command and do what you need to. See? Like here, ls and execute. So if you wanted to modify a file, like a configuration file, and then restart that service, you could. Okay. Another way people manage Linux box is through a web interface, and in that CentOS box I've installed a third-party package called Webmin, and it allows you to manage a bunch of services from a web page. There we go. See, secured HTTPS gives you a little dashboard of what's going on. Like what kind of services you have. If you want to modify your Apache web server, your postfix mail server. This Webmin interface does a pretty good job at knowing what you've installed. And like say you've had a web server and a mail server, it would know what you have configured. And like popular one is file server. Here's a way to configure your file services. And you can control your networking and NFS and whatever connections. So I find it really handy for people starting off that don't want to install a full-on web client and whatnot, and a SSH client, and be able to manage it simply using a web page. Okay. So there are some times where you want to have a full desktop, and there's 2 ways to get a full desktop on a Linux box. There's several ways actually, but the two ways I'm going to go through is VNC. VNC is very popular. It works on multiple platforms, Mac OS and Windows and Linux, and on those platforms they can be both the client and the server. So here we have just the viewer, and voila, we're going to connect to our CentOS box. You see that unencrypted connection, so I wouldn't use this over the internet. I would have to tunnel it. I'd recommend you tunnel it somehow. But right here you got the web interface where you can do whatever you need to. If you want to launch the web and whatnot, or open up your Linux email, you could. So that's VNC Viewer. And here's another one people from the Microsoft world might be familiar with. It's Remote Desktop. So here I'm going to launch it here. Okay, and then you can see I actually put CentOS in there. And a curious thing with Windows 10, you can actually, let me see if this works, go to Network. It's not on there, but if the services was running, let me see if I can run this. Oh, this is a new way of doing things. This CTL restart Samba. SMB. Like that. Okay. Anyway, in Windows, sometimes the Linux box appears. It might appear in a few minutes, but you could hit connect with Remote Desktop. But to prove a point, we're going to go here and connect it with the regular Remote Desktop client. And you see that you actually have to log in twice, or actually have to log in at this interface. You might not be used to that. And it's worth noting that my login Larry here that you guys see me do, it's part of a domain, Active Directory domain 2008. And we'll see in a few seconds. And maybe login 3 times. And there you go. Now I have different desktops running, and the RDP desktop gives me a different desktop as opposed to the CentOS, the VNC Viewer desktop. It gives you a different view. Okay, the other thing I want to show you guys is an X Windows server. So the actual server, it's confusing. You might think it's the client. The server runs on Windows 7 or Windows 10. And you connect to the client, or the client connects to you, which is a Linux box. So in the bottom corner here, you see it's not running. So I will launch this. There's various X Windows servers. This one's called Xmain. It's free. Now watch. Let me close this off. Open it up again. And if you want to see, you have to have this checked. Enable X11 forwarding in your configuration to be able to run X Windows sessions. So you click OK, and so now we can run a utility like Firefox. Maybe that's installed. Now it does take a little bit to load, but once it loads, it's pretty quick. And it's, see, this is actually running from, this is actually running from my Linux box, not from my Windows desktop. See, it's Firefox. You don't see that I launched a Firefox icon here. And another thing that people ask is, you're running it as a user. Break out of this. That does not have administrator rights. Say I wanted to run a program that needs administrator rights or the root access, I would first do xauth, say uth, and a list, and then I'll take the very last one because that was my last login, and then I'll sudo to root, and then I'll xauth add that. Now I should be able to run a program like gedit. I think it's on here. And let's see in a second. There you go. So now I'm as root, modifying a file, and I'm able to do what I need to do. So anyway, those are the tools that I use a lot. PuTTY, WinSCP, and not so much the web interface. And then once in a while I get into a VNC Viewer or remote desktop, and then a next Windows session. Anyway, thanks for watching my video, and hope you guys subscribe. Thanks.